morning, everyone. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Roberto Cicutto. I'm the president of La Biennale di Venezia. Thank you for being here. Thank you for facing the challenge of this pandemic. This is going to be an experiment, meaning we have managed to organize the festival. It was very important in order to prove that we are able, respecting the norms and together with regional authorities and the health authorities of the city, also Venice, we can actually organize a festival in presence. The results of this first week are rather comforting, and I hope we'll be able to reach the end of this festival in good health and having watched beautiful films, being together once again. I would like to welcome Anna Laura Orrico, the Undersecretary of State, the Italian Minister of Culture and Tourism, Gabriela Battini Dragoni, Deputy Secretary General, Luisella Pavan Wolf, Director, Council of Europe, Venice Office. Of course, Mr. Alberto Barbera, with whom, and together with the staff of the Biennale, we have organized this festival. I'm happy to see the result of a work we've been conducting for a few years that I followed since the very start. For some personal reason, I am the father of Margherita Chitti. So she was conceived with my former partner Luigi Muzzini in Mercato. So I'm not her biological father, but yes, we raised her here together with a very rich group of girls who were working with us. And I'm particularly proud because under signing the protocol between the Associazione, the Association and Biennale, what we've done together, it's very concrete. We have concrete figures. It is not just about providing guidelines and principles, but it allows reaching concrete results. And so I remember spending some time in the Casa del Cinema in Rome, where I was invited where the institutions showed very little attention to cinema and to the female role in the world of cinema. Well, I can say that now we are here in this very important moment where we pay attention to the results that we achieved. So I just wanted to strongly encourage you to follow this path. Biennale is here. It's in our DNA. We not only organize festivals, as you know, but we really have a dialogue with all the realities of culture. The Festival of Venice, the film festival is just one of the festivals of the Biennale, and it is important to stress this because we pay huge attention to contemporary art. Dialogue is, of course, very important. It's important in our society. We are here to prove this, and maybe together we'll be able to prove that thanks and through art, we'll be able to change the world. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the film festival this year. I would like just to tell you a few words. Well, as you know, the Festival of Cinema in 2020 adhered to Document 505, committing to reach gender equality within the film festival, and this is something that we have always done. Well, this year, as you know, at least for the main competition, we have been able to achieve almost complete parity without having to modify selection criteria and not even having to introduce the so-called quota rosa, a tool in which I don't believe. I think that quality is the only possible quality that we have to apply, and the female films here have been welcomed very positively, and this means that whenever we are watching a beautiful film, there's no gender reasoning that can be applied, and therefore I'm very happy to have 8 films out of the 18 in the main competition that are directed by women. And this goes to show that the film festival here in Venice does not have any kind of bias. Another element that I would like to underline regards the selection modalities together with our partners. That can meet most of women that work in the world of television and cinema. So instead of choosing, let's say, the red carpet that is usually turned into a so-called pink carpet, we decided to base our analysis on figures regarding promotion, production, and also access to audiovisual products. And so we are able to monitor, of course, the situation and highlight changes in progress, but especially to really boost policies that go against discrimination. One more thing and one last thing. The low percentage of female director, that is to say almost 24%, but you will be provided with the figures later on by Debora Rossi and Andrea Mercato. So 24% of films sent to the selection for the Film Festival of Venice. And I think these data are rather faithful, whereas the percentage of films that we have invited here reaches 28%, so slightly higher than average percentage, and also compared to last year. Of course, it is still a low number, a low figure percentage, although, of course, it is not our fault, meaning that we don't have many tools in order to intervene in that decisional policies that lies behind the choices of assigning a film to a female director rather than to a male director. Of course, here the film festival cannot do anything. However, we can do something. And we are doing something, and of course, I'm referring to the project Biennale College Cinema, where the number of films financed and produced by the Biennale reached in the past year from 3 to 4, precisely with this intention, that is to say, an equal number of young female and male directors can access funds for their first or second film, and this is precisely what we've done and what has happened this year, where only 2 out of the 4 films have been actually made, and they will be presented today and tomorrow. It's 2 films directed by 2 women, whereas the films directed by men have unfortunately been stopped by the lockdown, and so they will be then produced, made, and released and presented next year. This choice, I think, goes to show the commitment of Biennale in support of such a right cause. And again, I would like to underline that we have to face it in the right way, with the right tools, without generating side effects, as very often, unfortunately, we see and we witness in this sort of fight that is mainly led by women, but Biennale is with them in order to obtain as shortly as possible the results that we all want to obtain. I would like to conclude. I'm sorry, unfortunately, I have to leave for another meeting. I know very well the figures that you will be provided and presented today, and so my attention will continue. And thank you for participating here today. Let me now leave the floor to Luisella Pavan. Good morning. For the Council of Europe, it's a real pleasure and an honor being here again at the International Film Festival in Venice and being able to talk about women and men in this industry.
With a few thoughts. Europe and the world are currently facing a profound crisis. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted every sphere of human activity. Hundreds of thousands of people have died, economies have been paralyzed, social and cultural life has been brought to a halt in many countries, and governments have been forced to take restrictive measures to ensure the health and safety of their citizens. Throughout this period, the Council of Europe has worked to support its member states in continuing to respect democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Eurimages, the Council of Europe Cultural Fund, has also worked hard to support the film industry, plunged into disarray by cinema closures, cancelled productions, and postponed festivals. All of these activities were successfully transferred online, and decisions on funding, vital to bring relief to the sectors, continued to be made by special written procedures. Addressing inequalities between women and men was already an urgent challenge pre-COVID and a priority for the Council of Europe. But the sanitary crisis has deepened pre-existing fault lines. These include precarity and undervaluing of female employment, unequal distribution of the burden of care, increased vulnerability of women migrants, and the consequences of forced confinement with abusive partners. The last months have clearly demonstrated the relevance of groundbreaking Council of Europe instruments such as the Istanbul Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women. Our Committee of Ministers' recommendations on preventing and combating sexism and on gender equality in the audiovisual sectors are also providing essential guidelines and guidance to member states. Heightened vigilance is necessary to ensure that the post-COVID-19 world is not even more unequal, and that the crisis does not serve as an excuse for backtracking on reforms and on measures designed to prevent gender-based violence, sexism, and discrimination. But the disruption caused can also be viewed as an opportunity and as a chance to remake in a new and more diverse way decision-making structures at all levels. Prior to the arrival of the coronavirus, the Council of Europe's Cultural Fund, Eurimages, had already identified and taken action to reduce inequalities between women and men in the film industry. The fund adopted a first strategy for gender equality and a new one for the period 2018-2020 entitled Aiming for 50-50 by 2020, with the overall goal to provide equal support for projects by men and women filmmakers and to work to increase gender equality in the film industry. And the industry itself has also recognized the need to rethink its structures and functioning for a more diverse future. This is clearly necessary. Women represent only 22% of all directors of European feature films between 2015 and 2018. and only 19% of the total for European series, according to a recent report by the European Audiovisual Observatory. Eurimages' own statistics show that the budgets of films directed by women are smaller, with only 9% of projects from women falling into the high budget category, compared to 22% of projects directed by men for the period 2008 to 2019. These results do not reflect the effects of the recent crisis on the industry. Only further study will tell us what its impact has been. But there is an urgent need to address women's limited access to and visibility in the profession. Issues such as unequal access to decision-making and funding, lack of support for women-created content, and pay inequalities in the sectors. And we also need to look at on-screen content from a gender equality perspective in order to tackle gender stereotypes and sexism in this sector. As the film industry emerges from the shock of the pandemic, and I'm concluding with these remarks, these aims should not be forgotten. We should make sure that women and men will find in the audiovisual sector an environment in which creativity can flourish, free from discrimination and free from inequality. Thank you for your attention.
Passo la parola alla sottosegretaria Ana Laura Orrico.
Now I leave the floor to Ana Laura Orrico. Thank you and good morning, everyone. Of course, I would like to thank Mr. Barbera, Cicutto, and Pavan. I think it is very important to be here, and the decision to organize within the film festival this seminar dedicated to a very contemporary theme, that is to say gender equality. This is something that we're trying, it's a process that we're trying to speed up as government in applying a long series of measures in order to support gender equality. And in my opinion, it is also a cultural theme, a cultural approach that must be triggered in our country. And I think that the key here is, of course, training younger generations. In fact, still today, young girls and young boys are educated differently, and therefore, for instance, we see little girls playing with dolls and little boys playing with cars, as if we wanted to address, for instance, girls in a certain path and vice versa. And so, for instance, girls usually are told to or are suggested to study humanistic courses, whereas boys are usually encouraged to study math or scientific matters. And when I was a student, I remember that a lot of girls were very keen to study philosophy, but also mathematics. So you see, we are still very focused on the importance of men, thus sort of leaving behind or paying little attention to women. For instance, for me, it was very emblematic to find out that the first person who wrote a mathematic book in Italy was a woman. So for me, it was a very important finding, something that if I had found when I was still a teenager and adolescent, well, it would have probably changed the choices I made, and probably would have made me more confident also in terms of studying scientific matters, the so-called STEM matters, and so technical scientific ones. And so we have to pay more attention in training younger generations in order to foster gender equalities. We really have to help them understand that women and men both have the same abilities, the same skills in order to progress in their careers. And of course, in the world of the film industry, much has to be done. And not only in order to reduce the stereotypes of women and the way they are usually represented in films and audiovisual products, but especially to boost and to encourage women not just in the entrepreneurial path, but also in the creative ones. A series of studies and researches that I have read and analyzed showed, for instance, as during the training course to become directors, the percentage of women is much higher compared to the percentage of men. But then, however, the ones who actually become directors are usually men, and so this percentage is no longer true because men are higher in number compared to women. So in this respect, I think it's very important. The law on cinema in 2016 is very important because through a series of mechanisms, they support film production to commit and to involve a higher number of women compared to the past in order to have more equality between the number of women and men involved, and also in terms of the entrepreneurial aspect. And so I would like to thank film industry that is more and more aware of the importance of raising awareness on these themes, on this issue, and also regarding the production of films. And I would also like to thank you for their contribution to research, as I'm going to show you later on. I'm quite optimistic regarding the future. I really appreciate the fact that the film festival this year is hosting 8 female directors. I'm very happy that Kate Blanchett is here for the main jury. For instance, I remember her playing in the film Queen Elizabeth. That for me was very important, especially in terms of the role she represented, that she depicted, and the importance of this woman for European history. So I would like to congratulate myself for this. Thank you. I now going to leave the floor to lawyer Debora Rossi. She's also she's in charge of the historical archive of contemporary art. I would like to remind you that we are hosting an exhibition, Les Musées Inquiètes, that for the first time in 150 years of this institution has been able to collect the 6 directors in the storytelling of the most important moments of the Biennale, and the Director General Andrea del Mercato for showing us the figures regarding the Biennale and in terms of the theme we are dealing with today. So thank you.
precisazione su questo blocco di presentazione sulla ricerca.
So I would like to thank Iole Maria Gianmattasio for the Direzione Generale Cinema and Audiovisivo, Italian Statistics. For the second year in a row, they've been providing very important data and information regarding policies. Susan Newman-Baudet, Project Manager, Eurimages, who's connected through Zoom, and she's going to talk about pan-European statistics and programs supported by Eurimages. And now I'm going to leave the floor to Debora Rossi, Deputy General Manager. She's going to talk about some data, some very significant data regarding Biennale staff and also autistic support staff for Director Alberto Barbera and the juries. And then she's also going to give us some details regarding the film pre-selected and then presented here. So in this slide, you can see how the Biennale is structured, especially the roles covered in the higher levels. As you can see, the governance is divided into it's divided rather equally. So we have 50% male managers and 50% female managers. It's not just, or it's not a very simple 50%, also because regarding this division and this distribution, there is a substantial parity and equality. And so in the 8 male managers, I am included. So I'm also part of one of the general directors, and I'm part of the staff for certain tasks or proxies. As regards the other roles, they are equally distributed between central functions, that is to say, those functions that pertain to all the sector of activities of the Biennale, and more specific governance and organizational activities regarding the departments regarding the different departments of the Biennale. So these figures show a very strong balance within the organization. And there's a very high number of women, and this was not necessarily a strategic choice, but rather our experience over time. And so what happened is that after the training path, which is very important in development, the organization of the Biennale, because, for instance, we have created a specific path in the college, Biennale College, that is also dedicated to the support function. Well, these selections have brought many women, and women have actually, let's say, won within our organization, and not just that, because I must say that also in the CV that we usually receive through different channels and through our portal, well, there is a very high number of women, of female candidates. And so here It is interesting to notice that the high number of women is not necessarily limited to specific skills or competencies. For instance, literary or more philosophical, but also with very specific technical skills. So this is something that to me is quite important and peculiar for our organization. And this is also confirmed in the structure of the staff that supports the sector director. And so that is to say that a work group so besides the president's personal assistant, who's a woman who's been working for him for a very long time, there's also a rich group of consultants and experts for the selection of main competitions. And as you can see in this slide, the expert group and the consultants is substantially, basically divided into a, let's say, around 60%. So you see, for instance, 43% against 57%. And as regards consultants, we have 36.36% of women against 63.64% of men. So this is a stable data that has been confirmed over years. You have to consider that these are people who've been working for the director for a long time. As regards younger sections, things are more balanced because the expert group for virtual reality is equally divided into a 50% of women and 50% of men, and the same can be said for the heads of college cinema, that is equally distributed between 50% of men and 50% of women. So, of course, whenever we read these data and these figures, we have to consider that they vary according to the number of people, because we talk about heads of college cinema, and VPB. It's a group of only 2 people. So you can see, you can now understand the balance. And the very last figure, before tackling the specific program and the composition of this specific program of this edition of the festival, is the organization of the jury. So as regards juries this year, again, you can see a strong equality, so 50% of men and 50% of women. As regards to the main jury, just like last year, and just like Orizzonti jury, we have 60% of men against 40% of women. We can't say the same for Opera Prima and Venice Virtual Reality. Here, in fact, you can see over 60% of female presence against 35% of men. I think we should stress the fact that it's not just the participation and composition, but out of these 4 juries, we have 3 female presidents. And so this, of course, indicates that the overall trend of the festival is a very high number of women, and so a female professionalism is confirmed. I'm now going to leave the floor to the Director General for the more specific segment. Well, first of all, I would like to thank the people who have collected with me this very high number of figures regarding the 77th Film Festival. Daniela Persi, Silvia Menegazzi, Valentina Belloma, Pascal Gio, Chiara Marin, for the Film Festival, College, and also Venice Production Bridge. Here you see the first slide. And to me, it's very important. It regards the submissions. Well, last year we received more. This year we have 3,160 submissions, so slightly fewer than last year. But of course, this year is rather peculiar. No big changes regarding feature films. We have 22% of women participating with their films, just like last year. We have, well, we have 34% of short feature film directed by women. And so short feature films are usually more easily accessible by female directors, and this percentage shows precisely this fact. The other interesting aspect to underline is that regarding the virtual reality, that is to say, this new expressive means and frontier, there's a high presence of female director compared to feature films. So last year they were 32%, this year 28%, but it's always 6 points above the feature film. So the general context, as you can see, and this is something that we witnessed last year as well regarding first and second works, there's a positive trend. So there's been an increase in the number of female directors. And so hopefully in the future, these figures will be even more balanced regarding gender equality. As for Italian submissions, we can now analyze the Italian context, which proves to be more difficult. Here we have 18% of female directors for submissions coming from ITA. Feature films is even lower because we go from 22 to 15%. Short film, it's 21% compared to 34 last year. VR proves to be rather satisfactory. Here we have 36% of female directors. It's the only counter trend that we have in the Italian context compared to the international context in general. As regards selection, here we have an overall number compared to last year that is higher. Last year it was 22% of selected female directors. This year is 26%. Of course, we have to consider, and Alberto Barbera already stressed this fact, is that this year female directors have been boosted, let's say, because last year was 9.5% of female directors, whereas let's say that this year's harvest has been very rich in female directors. Their number is 42%. As regards the other sections, there is a good presence of female directors. As you see here, short films, Orizzonti, it's almost equal, 46 and 53%. And Biennale College is the same. Of course, I have to say that last year we talked about micro-budget films produced by the college, and so we defined a call that defines that films that are produced after a very long selection process are going to be at least 4, and out of these 4, at least 2 directed by women and 2 directed by men. So the figure that you see here regarding Biennale College Cinema is only the linear one, but if we also consider virtual reality, the percentage is higher, is significantly higher, because it reaches 66.6%. And so out of 5 films, 3 have been directed by women. So here you can see Biennale College Cinema and the submission. So unfortunately, Italy is still struggling in this respect. Maybe some of you already know the college process. However, we organize some preliminary workshops for Italian films, and the best ones are then inserted and included in the international project. And this is particularly useful for VR. And this year, for instance, there's a title in virtual reality with a female director that has been created by an Italian group. So international, we have over 50% of women, and this is the context of female directors for virtual reality, and then the 4 projects funded. And so in our call, at least 2. This year, we have 3. So this is not a binding objective, but then, of course, quality is the best rule to apply it, and quality knows no gender. Venice Production Bridge is stable, so the percentages are similar to those of last year. So we have a higher number of projects produced and led by women, selected pretty much in line. And then I would like to say something else before leaving the floor to Iole Maria Giannatasio. There's one element missing, and unfortunately, this year, there's a very interesting datum that we can collect only at the end of the festival. That is to say, the presence of credits divided according to the gender. And so at the end of the festival, we are also going to add this slide. Well, up to today, the number of gold credits we have 50% men and 40% women, and professional. The percentage is pretty much the same, 55 against 45, and then film delegation, 54 men and 45% women. Cinema and students, there's a higher presence of girls, especially among students, 58.51%. It's women that are present to this festival. So I think this is a very important figure that, of course, we will be able to consider properly when the festival is over. But it's something that makes us rather optimistic regarding younger generation, and especially regarding the presence of men and women here at the film festival. Now I'm leaving the floor to Iole Maria. She's going to talk about the policies of the Ministry of Tourism and Audiovisual here in Italy. Thank you. Well, thank you. Our figures are pretty similar, and it's really nice to witness this. Just a few words. First of all, I would like to thank Rossella Gaudio, my colleague, who elaborated these figures, and they are based on the main of our aids or my support that included in the score a particular percentage regarding the presence of women, of men. And so it's one of those criteria that for us is really important in order to assess the projects. And so there are some additional scores that can be added regarding the direction and regarding also co-production in order to boost this kind of works and also to send a message to the industry that we want to support, meaning that we really want to support works and films made by women. The data that I'm going to present to you today are graphs, but then we will also publish on a segment that we have on the magazine Mezzo, published by Istituto Luce Cinecittà. Also the comments that are necessary for graphs that otherwise could be and might be interpreted differently. The first slide I'm going to show is rather vast and comes from this annual document that we write on these policies on the industry. And that analyzed a different sample compared to the one we'll see today. There is a sample of 171 works out of the 270 works that we financed with all our funds. We have different forms of funds in order to see in the different roles, to see the number of women in the different roles that we're going to analyze here. Always regarding the film industry, of course. Well, overall, out of 3,800 roles, only 40% were women. However, if we consider more carefully, there are some cliches that have been strengthened because the only cases where women are higher in number compared to men is, as you can see, I hope you can see it, is the costume designer and makeup artist. And so probably those roles that are usually considered more more female roles, and then we have 50% regarding cinematographer, only 26% regarding producer, and direction 20% of women, so even lower, and a screenplay 29%. So this slide is very important in order to have a general context. Let's move on to the applications to selective funding for film production. So here we are perfectly in line with the figures that have been presented by the director of the market. So these are the applications we receive, and we've been analyzing the first 3 years. It came into force at the end of 2017. Of course, we need more time. However, if we consider the graph, the pie chart on the left, the applications amounts to 17.7%. If we consider the one on the right, well, this represents the works supported, and it reaches 26%. Maybe this is also in reason of this sort of help of this fund that it is given. But figures are still very low. I think this is rather worrying because we haven't seen this trend growing regarding the applications we've been receiving. If you consider here in the first year, that is to say in 2017, you can see the column on the left, the orange one. The rate of female applications was lower, but then it became stable around reaching around 17, 18% in the past 2 years. And here on the right, you can see the results in terms of films funded with higher numbers. Now, this is something I would like to share with you, also to maybe listen to your comments in case you have. because we have been wondering what is not working. Is it maybe that people don't know about this support for applications for films directed by women? Maybe this is something I have to specify. Usually, the producers are the one who present the applications, and so producers who decide to produce a work and to present it and to make the application. So is it maybe that this is not enough? Is it maybe that we need more time? So there are different questions that we need to analyze and that we need to understand. We're also organizing some questionnaires in order to understand how to make all this more efficient. Here, we see the applications received in these 3 years divided into 5 lines, and we have different lines dedicated to different sectors. And so the first one that you see on the left for the works made by authors under 35, the other one is works made by, well, actually first and second works. And so you may think, well, what is the difference between this one and the first one? Well, actually, usually first works are made by a director who are over 35, and then we have documentaries and then animations and established directors. I think this slide is very important because you see that there's a higher percentage of female directors regarding documentaries, pretty much what we were saying regarding short films. Short films and documentaries cost less, and for some reason, this makes it easier for women to access the direction of these kinds of products. Also, regarding authors under 35, women are higher in number. As for animations, is the lowest. Well, animation, unfortunately, we have a very small, a very limited number of animations because we don't produce much animation in Italy, and so these numbers, the numbers you see, are altered, are influenced by this very limited sample. However, we have to recall that animations usually have very high budget, and unfortunately, among established directors, the percentage of women directors is very low, and this is confirmed by this other slide where we have divided the age ranges, and for both genders, 40 and 60 is the most common. We know age range. We know that Italy, unfortunately, does not give many opportunities to youngsters. In the range from 20 to 40, the presence of women is higher, so this is double-sided. Maybe there is a cultural change in progress and women have more opportunities, or it could also be viewed more pessimistically. And so at first, they try, they start, they continue, but then it's very difficult for them to establish, to really affirm themselves. And so there are many opportunities to make the first work, but then making the second work is much more difficult. And if in the meantime a woman has become a wife and a mother, well, this makes it even more difficult. This is the so-called, this slide refers to the so-called budget gap and pay gap, that is to say the difference in cost in documentaries and fiction films, in works directed by men and women, and also the pay gap between the two gender. So these data do not consider the so-called anomalies. And so, for instance, fiction films, out of 611 films, there were 100 works with very high budgets, a budget over 7 million, so with a huge gap compared to the other ones. So we didn't take that into consideration, but there were 2 female directors. They were, in both cases, co-productions, in which Italy had a very, very small participation. As far as documentaries, we didn't consider 2 out of 308 because they had a budget that was higher than 2 million. So as you can see, the cost of documentaries directed by female is usually 5.73% lower compared to ones directed by men. And regarding fiction films, we have almost 9% lower. When we consider the pay gap, and so how much female directors are paid, despite very low cost of production for documentaries, women are usually paid 18%, almost 19% less compared to men, and 13% less compared to men. This slide is rather difficult to understand, but I'm going to show it to you. So it's the same idea, that is to say movie budget and pay gap, but here we also have included those anomalies we didn't take into consideration previously. So the two bars represent pretty much the same difference we've seen before. The small dots you see represent the occurrence of such anomalies. So in the case of women, as you can see, there is the highest budget. It's a budget of a very famous non-Italian female director, so a very specific case. However, you see that occurrences are not that many, and in case of men, they are more distributed, and so there are more cases of films directed by men with higher budgets. And the same can be said, and it's even stronger if we consider the pay gaps. So unfortunately, male directors are still paid much compared to women. This is the conclusion of my presentation. Of course, if you have comments, feel free. I really would like to thank Biennale for having insisted to organize this moment, this seminar, because it is very important to trace and keep track of the evolution of these statistics. Thank you very much. I would like to thank you. Well, yes, of course, we really had to do it. There was no excuse not to do it. It was something that we decided to do 3 years ago, and honestly, we managed to do. Now, Susan Newman-Baudet, project manager, Eurimages, is with us. She's connected through Zoom. Okay, yes, we can see her now.
So firstly, let me thank you, Mr. Del Mercato, your colleagues at the Biennale and the colleagues at the Venice Production Bridge for allowing me to make this presentation by remote means. So greetings to everyone from Strasbourg. Last year, at the first edition of this conference, which now feels like very different times and world, I made a presentation on gender balance in the film co-production submitted to Eurimages. And using the data, I tried to answer a fairly straightforward question, which was, has the fund's strategy on gender equality actually been able to make a difference? So this year, I wanted to, in fact, in line with the theme of the panel event, which will follow, introduce a special focus. And in a moment now, I'm just going to pass the screen over to the presentation to explain to you what that's about. One moment, please. So last year, as I said, we looked at gender equality data more generally. And this year, what I'd like to focus on is a special focus on new entrants, as captured, of course, by the projects that are submitted to Eurimages. As a reminder, these projects are submitted by production companies across all of the fund's 41 member countries. These include 39 countries covering wider Europe, with the exception of the United Kingdom, and 2 from across the Atlantic, Canada and Argentina. Eurimages is a cultural fund supporting a specific subset of overall film production. Nonetheless, we estimate that the co-productions applying to the fund represent approximately 41% of all European-led co-productions. We also presume that our data is quite representative of the art house production segment. At Eurimages, back in 2012, nonetheless, we asked ourselves another question about representativity, more specifically about the gender balance in the film projects we supported. One of the things that we discovered was, when we looked in detail at our work, that the gender gap was much larger than expected. You'll excuse me a moment, I'm just going to stop sharing the screen because we're not looking at the right presentation. So, if you will forgive me, I will continue to talk and explain to you. When we looked at data, detailed data, thank you. I wonder, could the technical group please play the presentation that I have submitted to them? I would be very grateful to that if you would do so. So just to come back, when we looked in detail at Eurimages' work, we found that the gender gap was a lot larger than we expected. Women represented only 23% of the holders of the key creative roles of director, producer, scriptwriter, editor, or DOP in the films that applied to the fund. Just out of 26% of the 150 directors involved in the applying projects were women. That's a mere 17% of the total number of directors. Could I ask you to advance, please? That's perfect. Now, could we go to the next slide? The response to the clear
I think we got a technical problem. I hope Zoom will stabilize and we can get back Susan Newman-Baudet. Novità dalla cabina di regia? A lei, ok. Allora,
collecting data.
wonderful.
Good. It looks like we're back again.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. So, as I mentioned, we've had 2 strategies at Eurimages and a third one on gender equality in preparation. Of course, Eurimages has absolutely no control over the projects which actually decide to apply for support. But creating awareness and communicating on the gender gap has made an impact, as we can see here. This chart shows the share of project applications with female directors. As can be seen, from 2012, there's been a clear and improving trend. However, when we look at, I see we've gone back, but never mind. Numerous factors could contribute to the increase, not the least of which is the general effect of new discussions in the industry on the foot of the Me Too disclosures. But at Eurimages, we also believe that our efforts to raise awareness and make the fund more welcoming have been a success, as we can see on this slide here. It shows how successful female and male directors were respectively when it came to actually obtaining support from Eurimages. In the years preceding, and at the very start of our sample and the work on gender equality, that's 2009 to 2013, 46% of projects directed by women were supported, whereas those helmed by male directors had just over a 1 in 2 likelihood of support. In the period from 2014 onwards, the trend was inversed in favor of female directors. If we look now at this slide, which shows how we shared the funding among directors, which is really the other side of the coin, we can see that there's been also a positive evolution since 2012. As you can see, we've moved from a split of support overwhelmingly in favor of male directors in 2012 to a more balanced situation, with 38% of support, 7.2 million euros, going to female directors. Clearly, the rising trend is linked to the increasing number of projects directed by women applying to the fund and to their improving rate of success. But these figures are not rising fast enough to allow Eurimages to reach its strategic goal of allocating 50% of overall funding to projects led by women in the near future. So much progress remains to be made, and any strategy for change needs to advance on multiple fronts. And this is one of them. It's done, we hope, by supporting the careers of younger filmmakers through a series of annual scholarships awarded to female directors attending prestigious residencies, including the Biennale College, and the Berlin NIPCA residency. But this also leads us to pose the question of how supportive the co-production support fund is at the Eurimages to new entrants in general and female entrants in particular. And the answer is quite surprising. Next slide, please. The top bar of the next slide. Could you go back, please, one slide? Thank you. The top bar of this slide shows the share of first and second films among all the applications received over the period 2010 to 2019. As you can see, 45% of the projects fall into one of these two categories, with 739 of some 1,600 projects submitted being either first or second films. If we break this down further, we can see that of all the film projects directed by women, 30% were first films and 25% second films, whereas among the much more numerous projects directed by men, a lower proportion were first and second films. Next slide, please. If we look now at the chances of being supported as a first or second time director at Eurimages, we can see that these are actually reasonably good. For first films from male directors, there's a 39% chance of support, rising to 43% for second films. For female directors, the chances of success are higher at 54% and 56% respectively. Part of the explanation may be the fact that average budgets for films directed by women are systematically lower in all categories, first, second, and subsequent films, than for male-directed projects. But the data here also raises a number of questions and to some extent strikes a cautionary note. We can see here that the chances of being supported as a female director with a first or second film at Eurimages are quite good, but less good for subsequent films. For male directors, the situation is inversed, with the best chance coming for third or subsequent films. We also saw in the previous slide that there were proportionately more first and second films than subsequent films among the overall number of films submitted by female directors. So we could ask ourselves if this is an indication that female directors tend to either leave the industry or indeed to other roles, or perhaps have particular difficulty in moving into the later phases of their career. Further work is needed to explore this question, but for now on, we could at least observe as follows. Of the more than 400 first films received by Eurimages over the last 10 years, we received only 25 films from directors where we'd already received their first film. So 25 second films where we'd already received a first film. And only 7 directors were supported by the fund for their first and second films. Of these, 5 were women. And their names are shown here, all no doubt well known to you. So the question is, what will now be the future trajectory for these women? And it's possibly a question to be addressed as we move towards our new gender equality strategy. Looking forward, we will of course be seeking to close the gender gap in the funding we allocate and to bolster women filmmakers at all stages of their careers. But we'll also launch a reflection on how to move towards greater inclusivity and diversity in our work. And it's with this very topical thought that I will leave you with my thanks for your attention, and perhaps, if we get the slide right, the last one, possibly an address where you can find further information. My thank you to all, and I pass back now the word to Mr. Del Mercato.
Thank you very much, Susan Newman-Baudet. Thank you for your very, very interesting data and the update, and also the, the commitment to keep on reflecting on the best means to support gender parity, gender equality in the film industry. We have a contribution from the floor, where I'm pleased to say that we have with us in the audience Charlotte Lund Thomsen. She's legal counsel to the International Federation of Film Producers and Association, FIAF, as we all know it. And she was supposed to, eccola qua, here we go. Can we have a mic for Charlotte? Yeah, there's an interesting information coming from FIAF.
Thank you very much. step over here so that I'm facing you all, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present an industry initiative that's also relevant to the conversation today. Would like to say at the beginning, for FIAP and for me personally, it's such a pleasure to be here and to be here in person. It's very important to our organization. And I salute you for your efforts to keep us all safe when we're working here, but also to include all the colleagues, including colleagues in Strasbourg online, so that if you're not able to travel, you can still contribute and participate in the debate, very important. So we've been taking a deep dive into some very interesting and relevant statistics and data. And we wanted to flag to you an industry initiative that we have been working on that is relevant also to giving data and concrete actions to your exchanges. So we have been working with many representative organizations in the community, producers, broadcasters, actors, trade unions, to produce a handbook, which is basically, I would say, a repertoire of mapping of all the initiatives we have that promote gender equality and diversity in the film and TV sectors in many member states of the EU. This is an action that is agreed in particular in continuation of the framework of actions that was agreed already back in 2011. So this is not a new issue on the agenda. And we're really looking at a roadmap for both off and on screen gender portrayal, equality of pay that we have discussed, equality in decision making, gender roles in the workplace, reconciliation of work and life balance, so really 360 degrees. Arriving at the handbook, and I invite you to visit the link where you can find the handbook and more information. For us, it was really a milestone to pause and to assess a little bit which actions are successful and which require adaptation, also with the insight of the data that you have presented today and Suzanne has presented, so that we can constantly evaluate and develop further to understand the best strategy. I want to stress in particular that we've looked at this throughout the ecosystem, so both on the business side and the creative side. You have a lot of data on directors, for example, producers, funding, but really we've tried to be 360 degrees to involve everybody, whether they have an employer role or an employee role, a creator, a business contributor, so that we really can present the full panorama. I obviously don't have time today to take you through all of the initiatives, but just to say that the themes that we worked on particularly are methodology for devising strategies and setting targets, elaborating indicators and monitoring progress. I think that's super important, and that's also why it's so important to come back here to the seminar year after year to understand where are we moving, raising awareness, of course, elaborating training, and making progress in the common and collective commitment to change. And finally, also how public authorities can support the efforts of industry itself. So please allow me to finish with an invitation to have a look at the work that has been done. It's a massive project, many contributions. We are proud of it, and we're especially proud that we can be included here at this important event to flag our initiative. And of course, I'm available for any questions you may have as a follow-up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you for being with us. Io adesso ho il piacere di...
I have now the pleasure, let's switch for the moment. It's called now Inclusion and Good Practices by Margherita, and I need to thank Adriano De Santis, headmaster of cinematography, that accepted our invitation to be here today to tell us something about the center and the activity of the center under a genre point of view. We have Paola San Giovanni, a director and teaching and artistic coordinator at Scuola d'Arte Cinematografica Gian Maria Volonté. We will have also her contribution to media and television. We are about to see her via Zoom. I would like to call here Adriano De Santis. Thank you, Yole, and thank you, Debora. I'll stay here with you, Adriano. For a brief moment, we will be the majority. Thank you, really, thank you, Adriano De Santis, who will show us something about the Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia. You have everything you need here. Really, thank you for accepting this invitation. It's very important to us. Thank you for the invitation, of course, to Roberto Cicutto, and to you, of course. It's a great pleasure to be here today because this is a particular topic we focus on at the Centro Sperimentale. Just to start, a couple of minutes on the presentation of our Centro Sperimentale di Cinematografia, the Cinematography Experimental Center. It's one of the research center and production center all around the world. It's one of the most important, is a founder member of the SELECT. We train technicians and artists and authors. We've been doing this since 1935. Our professors and teachers have different backgrounds. They come from different countries, both from Italy and abroad. All of our colleagues are committed to train our young participants. Let's see if we can go forward. At the school, we have 15 different departments. As you can see here, we deal with animation, with direction, documentaries, and cinematographies, acting, and we also have visual effects and supervisors department, so many things. We have been working a lot on new technologies. For example, last year we developed one of the first workshops in a school dealing with interactive cinema with new tools. So on one side we try to act and to protect our tradition that comes from the experience that we have collected along the years, but at the same time we try to develop research. Of course, the Centro Sperimentale is located in different seats and different headquarters. The historical one is in Rome, in front of the Cinecittà studies, and then along the years, a long time, we have created new headquarters and new seats: L'Aquila, Lecce, Milan, Palermo, Turin, and the international seat in Valencia. In January, a new seat will be created in Matera, here in Italy. As you can see here, different pictures of our headquarters. As I was saying before, the Centro Sperimentale is committed to ensuring a quite and fair share of research, taking particular care and paying attention to genders. Of course, we had in our past, and we trained in the past, great artists. Of course, a couple of names here: Liliana Cavagni, Francesca Chibugi, Francesca Calvelli, artistic director of our editing department, Maricetta Lombardo, Daniela Ciancio, and Francesca Cima in the production sector. So as I said before, as you can see here on the slide, it was just paving the way. As we were saying before in previous speeches, the audiovisual world is characterized by a male But things are changing. I'm happy to say that the Centro Sperimentale, we are reaching important results. And of course, we need to pay attention to talent. Regardless of the gender, we pay particular attention in this case on finding new teachers and professors where there is a fair equality. And of course, also during the selecting processes, we need to pay special attention on creating creating fair and right commissions and committees in order to have a female point of view as far as the selection process is concerned. We can see already here how things changed. That the cinematography department, as I was saying before, was completely devoted and dedicated to men in the past. In the present, we have 50% of women. Of course, these percentages change along the year. Of course, we have small numbers, so things change very quickly. We have 6 photographers and 8 producers, for example, so very small numbers and very small classes. In this slide, I wanted to compare 2 different years, 2004 and 2020, because up to 2004, a trend was there. But in the last years, and I took into consideration 2020, this trend has considerably changed. For example, a very difficult department to women was the sound department at the Centro Sperimentale. When we talk about sound, we talk about different professionals in the same department, because we have, of course, the editing and the mixing phase, all the different phases that then make up for the sound department. Of course, in this department, we had 0 women participating in it. Today, the average number, we have between 2 and 4 girls. Claudia Pansica, who graduated few times ago, is responsible now for the Netflix platform. So she succeeded in having a successful job. Another course, very important here, is the production one. So 2004, 0 women, to 2020, 6 women. And this is consistent. We have whole classes that are made of women. So at the Centro Sperimentale today we have 6 female producers and 3 male producers. Scenography, again, as I saw before, the situation is completely different. I remember the first years I started working there, where scenographers were mainly represented by men. The trend now is completely the opposite. In 2004, we had 0 women, 7 men. Now we have 6 women and 2 men. So as you can see, the situation is completely different. Photography and cinematography, the trend is changing. Again, struggling a little bit more compared to the other department, also because the profession and the job is completely specific here, more specific. But at the moment, currently, we have in 2023 women and 3 men. Here we have data about students in 2020, all the data, without scrolling them all, but I wanted to go back to 2018, and this is 2020. Quite the same, luckily. Well, of course, here we don't have data about our regional departments. Of course, we work with many sectors, so documentaries, production, advertising, and in Sicily, of course. In that cases, the ratio is 50-50. Another thing I wanted to highlight before, the screenplay department. Of course, in that case as well, women are taking over in every class we have. As far as screenplay is concerned, we have more women than men. One department that has and still have problems, but although, as I was saying before, we pay a lot of attention in commissions, is the direction classes. In the last years, we had mixed classes, both on international and national point of view. In the last decade, we had 2 or 3 times in which we had 3 men and 3 women in this case, in this moment. As you can see here, in 3 years, we have 3 different years, of course. At the same time, we can see that as far as direction is concerned, 3 women and 15 men. So in this case, unfortunately, the ratio is completely different compared to the usual trend. So this is a place we have to keep working on, of course, as far as directors are concerned. But I have to say, as far as applications are concerned and submissions are concerned, men are taking over, so the participation is completely unbalanced. I hope these figures have been useful, and I think they are, because many of our students then jump into the work world. 2 things to think about, 2 take-home messages. The first, as we were saying before, the world of directors is completely different, and particular also and specifically in Italy, because a young director internationally is 25 years old, in Italy is 50. So we need time, it takes time, we're investing, we're doing things about that, but we need time. For example, Letizia La Martire, one of our students, she works absolutely fine, and she graduated 2 years ago, but that one is an exception. The trend will take time. So we will need a time to see differences adapted to the market. The other take-home message and thing to think about, if it's true that we struggle a little bit more and that we have more difficulties, taking also consideration all the data that were presented by my colleagues, in order to protect and enhance, I would say, enhance a gender equality as far as directors are concerned, we must say that the audiovisual world is changing, and the role played by the director also in the future will be not as much as important, of course. So producers and screenplayers, we live now will be different. We live now in a period in which screenwriters are much more important, probably. So we need to focus on this. So we don't need to focus only on directors talking about gender equality. We need to pay also attention to the fact that we are now referring to a role that is decreasing in importance, because there are many other important roles now that are becoming more and more important. So both genders, of course, need to be enhanced, especially in these new words and jobs that are taking over. So thank you for your kind attention. Again, it was a pleasure to be here. I hope I've been useful with my figures. Thank you. Thank you, Professor De Santis. I can see now Professor Paola San Giovanni. Thank you for being here and for your contribution, and I'll just leave the floor. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Well, I wanted to change direction in this moment because we've been talking a lot about participation and percentages here. The reasons and the process that we do as Scuola d'Arte Cinematografica Gian Maria Volonté, and how we started talking about gender equality and inequality. Gender inequality So gender inequality together with our culture, which is strongly determined by this difference, are two aspects that are strongly characterized by being part or being a man or a woman. All these topics were fundamental reasons for the creation and foundation of the Gian Maria Volonté School, which is about to be 10 years old. So in this 10 years, we have tried to focus in different occasions on this topic. So sharing ideas, debates, and meetings aiming at providing both for managers and teachers and professors, but also for students, aiming at giving tools able to interpret reality. We have worked on, I don't know, behavior modes or advice, small steps, like for example, the language used, which is yet very important. So starting from communications, we try not to use the male, masculine adjectives or nouns. We try to stay fair and neutral. Last year, we felt the need to structurate a more complex and complete process on these topics. That's why we have implemented a seminar that is developed in 3 years at the Gian Maria Volonté School. This process, this curriculum focuses on stereotypes and gender equalities and female roles played. This seminar is for all the students that are part of our school, mainly because not only for directors and screenwriters, but because we think that new new students will be called to do different things when they will work. So also their training process must take into account these gender topics and gender equality topics. And this is because we think that these topics are core aspects in the Italian culture, particularly. So the program for this 3 years, compared to the Centro Sperimentale, we close with this 3 years and then we start again. So in this seminar, we have cinema theory, curated by Ms. Santi, that has been dealing for many years with gender equality and cinema for women. And then we have also a more workshop and experimental play part curated by Alto Profilo Association in this case. Last year, this is group of techniques taken by the theater that aim at changing and analyzing social and political oppression, and we thought that this could be a very effective tool to as I was saying before, deal with these patriarchy topics. And according to the experience that we had the last 3 years, we have put this workshop part in the orienting phase, that is to say, something that focused a lot on gender inequality as far as the job world is concerned. Moreover, together with these interventions, starting from the third year, we will also have two historians taking having lessons, that is to say, two scholars and researchers, and this is due to the fact that we felt the need to go deeper into details on all those elements that build the male culture. So we need to analyze all the ways in which we build female characters together with a deep analysis on the different stereotypes, specifically towards men, and at the same time thinking about cinema narrative along history. So the theoretical and the workshop courses will be sided by this contemporary analysis. In this path, in this course, we will have tools investigating on women stereotypes and men and male stereotypes and how masculinity is represented nowadays. Because giving these tools, we think that people will be able to better understand all the influence that is present on a daily basis, both for men and women. This aims at focusing on the role played by masculinity in politics, in society, and also in specific topics. Also in cinema, as we said before in this seminar, we need to take responsibility to change this trend, of course, also considering all these social phenomena that apparently have nothing to do with men per se. So summing up, this is our contribution by the Gian Maria Volonté School. This is an experience, an original experience, and as far as I know, I think it's unique among all training centers, specifically on cinema. So this is our experience. Of course, besides statistics and data that are very important, but of course we try also to focus on other aspects, because statistics are exactly following the trend we talked about a couple of speeches ago. I wanted also to say that the training actions implemented must focus on raising awareness on gender issues, because the part on participation and equality and number equality is fundamental and of paramount importance. And we believe, though, that At the same time, there shall be an important path and course about awareness on gender stereotypes and culture in which we live, of course, in order to have the most effective tools to address these topics and to produce something that makes sense, not only about directors or screenwriters, but also young professionals that then need to deal with other parts and disciplines and jobs that make up for the film industry. Thank you, Ms. Sangiovanni. I think you made it clear that it's important to talk numbers, of course, and you gave your contribution under a philosophy and content point of view. So thank you for your contribution, which was a completely different perspective, but which was very interesting. I would like to read all the documents that are part of this training path. So if I would personally be very interested in it. So thank you again for your contribution. Thank you, Adriano De Santis. Last year we said it would be beautiful to have something about training courses in Italy. Probably next year we will go a step further and talk about the European situation. But I think this is a very good starting point, starting from our domestic situation. So thank you, Adriano, and thank you, Mrs. Sangiovanni. I would like now to call here Margherita Chiti, Enrico Vannucci, respectively Vice President of Women in Film and TV, and Enrico Vannucci, Deputy Executive Director of Eurimages. We are kind of sticking by the times. Thank you, Margherita. Thank you for being here. Good morning. So I will try to be as brief as possible. So from this particularly difficult year, the culture sector is absolutely damaged and was absolutely damaged, although it played a very important role to all those people that were locked down in-house. And women in this sector were damaged the most. Many of us were thrown back 2 decades ago because they had to take care for the house, for kids, for the partners, and the smart working. In this case, women had to choose between their career and professional choices. But what we say today is not something about the past, but something about the future. This must be a starting point for clear objectives and projects as far as 2021 is concerned. We are here to honor the panel that we were given today in this prestigious event as the director Alberto Barbera. This Venice Film Festival could also be avoided, but it was important to do and to support. The festival this year sees more women as far as directors are concerned, also because, as the director underlined before, because we have never asked for female quotas. We will never ask for them, but we only aim for quality. We have also had Susanna Nicchiarelli and Emma Dante, two Italian directors. The topic we talk about this year is training, is cinema schools, film industry schools. We have started data research as far as school students and teachers' attendance on in the most important cinema schools in Italy. We have a great tradition on that, and starting from the Centro Sperimentale di Fotografia, we heard before, we have graduates that are now famous all over the world. In this case, we don't have a balance, which is very important, but in the last periods, we have seen an increase in female enrollments in almost all courses. We It seems that nowadays managers and teachers need to think about that, because an inequality as far as important roles and managing roles are concerned will cascade on the other roles. For example, and I say this just as a proposal, not as a critique, we would like to raise awareness talking about the Centro Sperimentale, a paper that is present on their website that, according to our opinion, need to be revised. That is to say, the list of advised 100 films that only includes Lina Wertmüller and Francesca Archibugi, and we come back to the 1910s, leaving out some directors. Let me just quote some of them: Liliana Cavani, Cristina Francesca Comencini, Emma Dante, Valera Golin, Susanna Nicchiarelli, Alice Rohrwacher, just to name a few. Gina Davis, that says, if there's a place where gender equality can be solved in real time, is on the screen. In the time that is needed to write a film or a TV series, we will change future. We can change future. Our association starts from this awareness. Changing cultural model, we can change society, and a certain kind of managers brings with itself important choices, because students will take inspiration from this. So we need to change the managing boards, and then we also need to take and pay attention to all the things shown to students. So the Centro Sperimentale, we recommend the Centro Sperimentale to change this list, and if you want, we can do it together. So as we started a very effective and useful dialogue with Paola San Giovanni and the Gian Maria Volonté School, we want to start from today on a protocol about inclusion and gender equality to all cinema schools. The core will not only be the entrance and the enrollment of women in the world, in the work market. We know that this year is a particular moment, but we want also to focus on contents and narratives. At the moment, we are talking with Mimi Ferrara in Milan and Victoria Thomas from the London Film School, whom I would like to salute publicly for all the contents they have shared with us. Concluding, I would like to propose with something that will be then further discussed with Roberto Cicutto and Alberto Barrera, looking at the future and aiming at building new inclusivity paths. This is my proposal. So let's collaborate with Biennale College training program, which is prestigious, balanced, and extremely inclusive. So a pearl in the world scene, as we saw from the data of last year. Since we want to go deeper into detail in this proposal, of course, when we're done here and the Biennale is absolutely interested in it, we would like to think about a scholarship dedicated to women who want to become creative producers, meaning professional roles that follow a project from scratch. So starting from the basis, so the funding, and then the screenplay, screenwriting, and all the other roles, and then casting. It's very important to support female figures and roles that have the possibility to monitor and supervise on the whole process in order to ensure balance and equality as far as contents and narratives are concerned. I'm thinking about Reese Witherspoon, that was awarded by the Oscar, with the Oscar, that wanted to choose and create female projects to be developed, supporting a precise narrative that is chosen by women. The results of this project are Big Little Lies, Bridge Bill, The Morning Show by Apple TV, and Little Files Everywhere for Amazon Prime. Kate Blanchett, president of our jury, wanted to say something as a creative for Mrs. America and Stateless. So we just asked to Biennale to sit with us to define all the details about the scholarship to support all the people involved in this project. Also thanks to the international net that is the grounding part of our festival. So thank you all for giving your contributions and statistics and research, which are very precious because they made up for the concrete basis of our thinking and our proposals, and let's hope future and common initiatives. Thank you all for your participation. Thank you, Margherita. So I will take into consideration their proposal, but I'm not the person to that can give you the answer. I leave the floor to Enrico Vannucci. Thank you. So I will start in English. I would like to start by thanking all people here, and I'll switch now into English.
In my conclusion, on behalf of Eurimages, to this most valuable seminar, debate, and especially data sharing. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Biennale and its Italian partners, Women in Film, Television and Media and Dissenso Comune, for organizing this second edition of the annual seminar on gender equality and inclusivity in the film industry, and for inviting Eurimages to give a European perspective on this critical issue. As you may know, Eurimages has been working on gender equality issues for several years now, trying to make a positive contribution so that the gender gap in the European film industry is filled. Many speakers today have already emphasized to what extent 2020 is, so to speak, a very peculiar year, and how important is the contribution timely provided by the Biennale by organizing the mostra despite the COVID challenge as a sign of confidence in and concrete support of the world of film and the audiovisual industry, to use Mr. Barbera's words. Let me add that this year the Mostra del Cinema has also given an important sign in the specific field of gender equality. Not only is the great female talent highly represented in this year's festival, I would like to recall the president of the jury, which has been several times mentioned, 2 Golden Lions awarded to 2 great women for their career achievements, 8 women out of 18 directors competing for the Golden Lion. But this annual seminar on gender equality and inclusivity has also been confirmed, and let me say it, very successfully organized. This way, all organizers and participants today have made it clear that they consider gender equality a very relevant issue and that they intend to continue working together in order to ensure that further progress is made in this field. We all have heard that even though some progress has already been made, much remains to be done for gender equality in the film industry to be fully achieved. Eurimages is, of course, willing to contribute within its means and in line with its mission as defined by its Board of Management to enhance gender equality and inclusivity in the film industry, and therefore to continue participating in this annual seminar here in Venice. So I would like to finish by saying grazie mille a tutti e arrivederci al prossimo anno.
Bene, io
So I would like to say a couple of things. Thank you all for being here to this seminar that lasted at the end 2 hours. It was supposed to last 1 hour and a half, but the interest was so much that we wanted to make it last more. So thank you all, and thank you to all those that have contributed to this year's seminars and with all the messages. So Eurimages, the Council of Europe, and I would like to thank for this Lucella Pavan-Wolf, Women in Film TV. So what else? Let's see next year. So see you next year. Thank you again. Thank you all.